Good evening and welcome to bearwith.atlist.co.uk's review of The Darkness 2. Based on a popular comic book franchise, The Darkness 2 is a first-person shooter following the story of Jackie Estacado, a mafia boss in possession of an ancient supernatural power known as the Darkness. Fans of the comic will appreciate this game as while it follows a different story arc than the comics do and there are significant differences between the two Darkness universes, the core essence of the Darkness franchise is very much present in the game. From start to finish, the game feels like The Darkness, combining an inherently dark and tragic tale with over-the-top gruesome violence and hilarious dark humor. The game focuses on Jackie's struggle against the Brotherhood of Darkness who are trying to take the Darkness power away from him, while he must battle his own personal demons as the Darkness continuously tortures him with memories and illusions of his dead girlfriend Jenny. As a fan of the comic, I was greatly impressed with how the game manages to strike a balance between its sad, tragic story and its humorous gameplay littered with over-the-top gruesome violence. Gameplay-wise, The Darkness 2 is a solid shooter game with guns and some unique abilities granted by the Darkness power. These primarily come in the form of a pair of tentacles which can, among other things, be used to grab and throw objects such as explosive barrels at the enemy or perform various executions. These executions are so gruesome, so over-the-top, so hilarious, they just never get old. They come in 4 different groups, each of which provide different bonuses such as a health boost or extra ammunition. Other powers include useful tricks like gun channeling, which empowers your guns with the Darkness and gives you overwhelming firepower, or the Black Hole ability, which can obliterate half a dozen enemies at the same time. And then there's the Darkling, who constantly entertains the player with his commentary and is more than happy to lend a helping hand. The Darkness powers can be upgraded with Darkness essence gathered throughout the game, which makes mastering the executions early on quite advantageous. Keep in mind that the Darkness powers do not function in bright lights, so you need to use your guns to shoot the lights out. Beyond the main campaign telling Jackie Estacado's tale of tragedy and over-the-top violence, we also get a multiplayer component in the form of short co-op missions called Vendettas. The majority of these can be played alone in offline mode as well, greatly extending the single-player component of the game. 4 different playable characters are available in Vendettas, each with their own personality, their own one-liners, as well as their own abilities and unique weapons. We have Jimmy Wilson, a Scotsman with a huge axe and an army of kamikaze Darklings, J.P. Dumond, a voodoo priest who can create a black hole to obliterate the opposition, Inugami, wielder of the cursed soul-drinking sword Kusanagi, and my personal favorite Shoshana, wielder of the Arm of the Night, which is by far the most badass gun in the entire game. The best thing about The Darkness 2 is that unlike its predecessor, this game was actually released for the PC as well. And while most console ports have shitty controls on the PC, this game is one of the exceptions. Controls are fluid and intuitive with a keyboard and mouse. Kudos to the game developers for getting this right. Hopefully, the next installment of this franchise will come to the PC as well. Speaking of which, The Darkness 2 has 2 possible endings, one of which sets up a sequel and reveals who we can expect to see as Jackie's next opponent. And all I have to say is that the sequel can't come soon enough. The visuals in The Darkness 2 are impressive and quite high resolutions are available in the PC version. While we do not have Crysis levels of photorealism here, let's face it, we don't need it. For the over-the-top violence in this game, the somewhat cartoonish visual style we get is more than enough, and it manages to create a dark atmosphere just fine. Voice acting in the game is also excellent. For example, Mike Patton does a great job as the voice of the Darkness, while the mobsters are portrayed in the same hilariously stereotypical fashion as the Noochies were in the Punisher game, making interactions with them very entertaining, allies and foes alike. After all this praise, does this game have any negatives at all? Sadly, it does. The Darkness 2 is far too short. The main campaign takes a mere 7 hours to complete, and while those 7 hours are packed full of very satisfying content, I was left yearning for more when the game was over. Obviously, a short but satisfying game is better than a long but mediocre one, so at the end of the day I was happy with this, but it would have been even better to have a longer single-player campaign at this quality. The Vendettas take 4 to 5 hours to complete, but that's fine considering that the 4 very different characters potentially quadruple the playtime of this mode. The only downside of the Vendettas is that the characters have very limited abilities, providing for very little variety in gameplay, which can be slightly disappointing after getting spoiled by the shitload of options available to Jackie Estacado in the main campaign. One last thing that was a little disappointing is the lack of Jackie's darkness armor from the comic. While we do get an upgrade that covers Jackie in a darkness armor, we never see the traditional badass looking darkness armor of the comic on him in any of the cutscenes. This is a minor complaint, but the badass armor we know from the comic would have made this game even better. Overall, I highly recommend the game to anyone who likes first-person shooters and over-the-top dark humor. For fans of the comic, this game is essentially a must-buy. If you don't know the comic at all, then you should probably play the free demo first to get a feeling of what you can expect. Quite frankly, this is the best game I've played in the past 2 years, surpassing even the greatness of Deus Ex Human Revolution, which was by far my favorite game of 2011. The Darkness 2 may not revolutionize the first-person shooter genre, but it doesn't need to. It is a fun game that stays true to its roots. It simply feels like the Darkness as you play. It basically brings the comic book to life on your screen and entertains on multiple levels. What more can you ask for?